My girlfriend faked being allergic to my dog, so I'd get rid of him. Little did I know, she's been feeding him treats behind my back for months. I've been with Jessica for about 8 months now, and honestly, things have been pretty great between us. She's smart, funny, and we have this easy chemistry that I haven't felt with anyone else. The only issue has been my dog, Bruno. He's a 3-year-old golden retriever mix, and he's basically been my best friend since I adopted him from the shelter. From day one, Jessica claimed she was severely allergic to dogs. She'd come over and immediately start sniffling. Her eyes would get watery and she'd have these dramatic sneezing fits. It seemed legitimate enough, and I felt terrible watching her suffer just to spend time with me. She never asked me to get rid of Bruno directly, but she'd make these subtle comments about how much better she felt at her place, or how she wished we could spend more time together without her health issues getting in the way. About 3 months ago, the comments became less subtle. She started talking about how serious our relationship was getting, and how it was hard to imagine a future together when she couldn't even be comfortable in my home. She'd mention apartments she'd seen that didn't allow pets, or talk about her friend who had to rehome her cat when she moved in with her boyfriend. The pressure was building, and I was honestly starting to consider finding Bruno a new family. I felt awful even thinking about it. Bruno had been with me through my worst breakup, through losing my job last year, through everything. But I was also falling hard for Jessica, and the idea of choosing between them was tearing me apart. I started researching hypoallergenic solutions, expensive air purifiers, allergy medications, anything that might help. Last weekend, Jessica was supposed to come over for dinner. I'd planned this whole evening, cooked her favourite meal, even bought some fancy wine. But she texted me an hour before saying she had to work late and would see me tomorrow. I was disappointed but figured I'd just have a quiet night in with Bruno. Around 9 that evening, I realised I'd left my phone charger in my car. As I walked out to grab it, I heard this familiar voice coming from my backyard. I thought maybe my neighbour was having people over, but something made me walk around to check, and there, sitting on my back porch, was Jessica. She was baby talking to Bruno, scratching behind his ears, and feeding him what looked like homemade dog treats from a little bag. I just stood there, completely frozen, watching my supposedly allergic girlfriend having the time of her life with my dog. Bruno was in heaven, his tail going crazy, doing that thing where he rolls over for belly rubs. Jessica was laughing, completely relaxed, not a sniffle or watery eye in sight. She was talking to him like they were old friends, saying things like, "Who's a good boy? Did you miss me? I brought your favourites." I must have made some noise because suddenly Jessica looked up and saw me standing there. The colour drained from her face instantly. She jumped up so fast that she knocked over the bag of treats, and Bruno immediately started gobbling them up off the ground. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then she started stammering about how she was just checking on him, how she'd been trying to build up her tolerance, how it wasn't what it looked like, but it was exactly what it looked like. I asked her how long this had been going on, and after some back and forth, she finally admitted she'd been coming over to see Bruno for months. She'd even made friends with my neighbour, who'd been letting her into the backyard when I wasn't home. She said she felt terrible about the lie, but had gotten in too deep to admit the truth. The crazy part? She's not allergic to dogs at all. She grew up with them. She loves them. She was faking the sneezing and the watery eyes because she thought I was too attached to Bruno, and that it was weird for a grown man to be so close to his pet. She figured if she made herself seem incompatible with dog ownership, I'd eventually choose her over him. She'd been planning this elaborate manipulation for months, watching me agonize over the decision, letting me feel guilty about her fake suffering. But she couldn't help herself from actually spending time with Bruno, because in her words, he's the sweetest dog ever, and I couldn't resist. I told her to leave. She tried to explain, tried to say she did it because she loved me and wanted a future together. But I couldn't get past the months of lies, the manipulation, the way she'd been willing to let me get rid of my best friend, based on something completely fabricated. She's been texting and calling non-stop since then, saying she made a mistake, that she'll never lie again, that we can work through this. But I keep thinking about all those nights I lay awake feeling guilty, all the times I looked at Bruno and wondered if I was being selfish by keeping him. The weirdest part is that if she'd just been honest from the beginning, we probably could have worked something out. I'm not unreasonable, but the level of deception, the willingness to let me suffer over a decision based on lies, that's something I can't just get over. And that's the end of that story. Honestly, the sheer calculation behind this whole thing is what gets me. She literally befriended his neighbour to sneak into his yard and hang out with a dog she was pretending to be allergic to. That's not just a little white lie, that's an elaborate con job. The fact that she couldn't resist actually spending time with Bruno just makes it even more twisted. How do you fake sneeze for 8 months while secretly being best friends with someone's pet? I'm glad he chose the dog. Bruno never would have put him through that kind of emotional manipulation. Speaking of complicated relationship dynamics, this next story takes things in a completely different direction. I accidentally catfished my coworker for 6 months. Now she wants to meet her online boyfriend and has no idea it's me. This is going to sound completely insane, but I've somehow managed to create the most awkward situation possible, and I have no idea how to get out of it. I work at a mid-sized marketing firm downtown. It's one of those open office spaces where everyone knows everyone else's business. There's this woman, Riley, who sits about 3 desks away from me. She's smart, funny, always brings homemade cookies for the team, and I've had the biggest crush on her for probably 2 years now. The problem is I'm painfully shy when it comes to talking to people I'm interested in. I can give presentations to clients, lead meetings, handle conflict resolution, but put me in front of someone I like romantically, and I turn into a stammering mess. About 6 months ago, our company started using this new project management platform that includes internal messaging features. It's supposed to be for work collaboration, but people use it for everything. Riley had posted in one of the general channels about being frustrated with a dating app, saying something about how all the guys on there seemed to have the personality of wet cardboard. I don't know what came over me, but I sent her a direct message from my account. Not flirting, just commiserating about how dating apps can be awful. We started chatting about terrible date stories, and the conversation flowed so naturally. For the first time ever, I felt like I could actually talk to her without my brain short-circuiting. Here's where it gets complicated. Riley mentioned that she liked talking to me because I seemed different from the other guys at work. She said most of them were either trying too hard to impress her or treating her like one of the guys, but our conversations felt genuine. The thing is, she'd somehow gotten the impression that I worked in our satellite office across town. I think there was some confusion because my profile listed my department as Digital Strategy Remote, which was technically accurate since I work from home 2 days a week. I should have corrected her right then. Should have said, actually, I sit like 10 feet away from you every day. But I didn't, because for the first time in 2 years, Riley was actually talking to me, like I was interesting. She was engaged, asking questions, laughing at my jokes. I was getting to know the real her, beyond the professional facade we all wear at work. The conversations evolved from work complaints to deeper topics. We talked about our families, our goals, books we were reading, movies we loved. She told me about her anxiety around public speaking, something I never would have guessed since she always seems so confident during meetings. I shared stories about my photography hobby, which none of my co-workers know about. After about a month of daily messages, Riley started referring to our conversations as the highlight of her day. She said talking to me helped her decompress after stressful meetings. I was falling for her even harder, but now it was based on actually knowing her as a person, not just the office crush version I'd built up in my head. 2 months in, she started calling me her work boyfriend, joking about how I was the only man in her life who actually listened to her. By month 3, the jokes had evolved into something that felt more serious. She'd message me things like, "I wish you worked in our main office so we could grab coffee," or I keep hoping I'll run into you when I have meetings downtown. I knew I was in too deep, but I couldn't figure out how to tell her the truth without ruining everything. Every day at work, I'd watch her typing on her computer and know she was probably messaging me. I'd see her smile at her screen and know I was the reason. But I also saw how she interacted with me in person, how she'd give me polite nods and brief small talk before moving on to more animated conversations with other co-workers. Last month, things escalated when Riley started talking about being lonely and wanting to meet someone genuine. She said she'd been thinking about asking her work boyfriend if he wanted to meet up in person. I panicked and made up some excuse about being swamped with a big project and not having time for socializing, but she didn't drop it. If anything, it made her more determined. She started talking about planning a casual meetup, maybe grabbing lunch near the satellite office. She even looked up restaurants in that area and sent me links, asking what I thought about different places. 2 weeks ago, she told our mutual co-worker Jake that she'd been talking to this amazing guy from work and thought he might be the one. Jake, not knowing any of this backstory, immediately started grilling her about who it was and why she was being so secretive. Riley just smiled and said she wanted to meet him in person before making any announcements. Yesterday was the breaking point. Riley messaged me saying she'd talked to HR about organising a joint team building event between our office and the satellite location. She was excited about finally putting a face to the name and seemed convinced that we'd have this amazing romantic comedy moment when we met. The worst part is, I think I'm actually in love with her. Not just the fantasy version I'd been crushing on for 2 years, but the real her that I've gotten to know through our messages. She's even more incredible than I imagined. She's thoughtful, creative, has this dry sense of humour that kills me, and she's passionate about things I never knew interested her. But now she's planning this whole elaborate scheme to meet someone who doesn't exist, at least not in the way she thinks he does. She has no idea that the person she's been pouring her heart out to sits 3 desks away from her, and I have no idea how to tell her without destroying whatever this is between us. Part of me keeps thinking maybe I should just show up to whatever meeting she arranges and hope she'll be happy. It's me, but what if she feels betrayed? What if she thinks I've been making fun of her this whole time? What if knowing it's me ruins all the genuine connection we've built? I'm supposed to respond to her latest message about potential meeting dates, and I have no idea what to say. And that's where that story ends. This is like a rom-com nightmare scenario, 6 months of building a genuine emotional connection based on a misunderstanding that just kept snowballing. The poor guy is caught between confessing and potentially losing everything, or continuing the charade until it inevitably explodes. What makes it worse is that their connection seems real and meaningful, but it's built on this fundamental deception. I actually feel bad for both of them, because she's about to have her heart broken when she finds out her perfect guy has been sitting right there the whole time. Now this next one is going to take us in a completely different direction. My roommate has been pretending to be my boyfriend to get free meals from my grandmother for 3 years. This is honestly one of the strangest situations I've ever found myself in, and I'm not even sure how to process it. I live with my roommate Derek in a 2-bedroom apartment downtown. We've been friends since college, and when we both moved to the city for work, sharing rent just made sense financially. Derek's a good guy, clean, pays his bills on time, and we get along well enough. My grandmother lives about 20 minutes away in this cute little house with a garden she's incredibly proud of. She's 82. Lives alone since my grandfather passed, and I try to visit her at least once a week. She's always been the type to show love through food. Every time I come over, she's got a full spread waiting, enough to feed a small army. About 3 years ago, I brought Derek with me to one of these visits. My grandmother had been asking if I was seeing anyone, worried about me being lonely in the big city, the usual grandmother concerns. When Derek and I showed up together, she just assumed we were dating. I started to correct her, but Derek jumped in with this whole story about how we'd been together for months and how wonderful I was. At the time, I figured he was just being nice, helping me avoid the whole, "when are you going to find someone" conversation. My grandmother was so happy, immediately started doting on Derek, asking him about his job, his family, treating him like the grandson-in-law she'd been hoping for. The whole visit, she kept bringing out more food, making sure Derek had seconds and thirds of everything. After we left, Derek mentioned how incredible the meal was, how he hadn't had home cooking like that since his own grandmother passed years ago. He seemed genuinely moved by her kindness, and I thought it was sweet. I didn't think much of it when he asked if we were visiting her again soon. The next week, Derek offered to drive me to her house. He showed up with flowers for her, had remembered details about her garden from our previous conversation, and spent the entire visit asking her about her recipes. My grandmother was absolutely glowing. She kept pulling me aside to whisper about how wonderful Derek was, how lucky I was to find such a thoughtful young man. This became our routine. Every Sunday, Derek would drive us over to my grandmother's house. He'd bring her small gifts, help with little tasks around the house, listen to her stories about my grandfather. She started cooking even more elaborate meals, always making sure to pack us leftovers to take home. Derek would sit at her kitchen table, eating her homemade pasta or pot roast, telling her about his week like she was his own family. I kept meaning to tell her the truth, but Derek seemed to genuinely care about her, and she was happier than I'd seen her in years. She'd call me during the week, just to ask how Derek was doing, whether he was taking care of himself, if he needed anything. It felt harmless and, honestly, it solved the problem of her worrying about me being alone. But then things started getting more complicated. My grandmother began talking about Derek like he was already part of the family. She'd make comments about our future together, ask when we were thinking about getting married, wonder about great-grandchildren. Derek would just smile and change the subject, but I could see he was getting uncomfortable with how invested she was becoming. Last month, my cousin Angela came to visit my grandmother and mentioned meeting Derek. Angela immediately started asking me questions about when Derek and I had started dating, why I'd never mentioned him before, how serious things were between us. I realised my grandmother had been talking about us to the entire extended family. The situation reached a breaking point 2 weeks ago. My grandmother had been feeling under the weather, and I went to check on her without Derek since he was working late. She spent the entire visit asking about him, worried that something was wrong between us since he hadn't come with me. She kept saying she could tell he made me happy, that she hadn't seen me smile so much in years. That's when it hit me how deep this deception had gone. My grandmother wasn't just enjoying Derek's company, she was emotionally invested in our fake relationship. She'd been planning her Sunday meals around his favourite dishes, buying ingredients she thought he'd like, looking forward to our visits as the highlight of her week. When I got home that night, I confronted Derek about the whole situation. I told him we needed to figure out how to tell my grandmother the truth because it was getting out of hand. That's when he broke down and admitted something I never saw coming. Derek told me he'd been going to see my grandmother on his own. Not just the Sunday visits with me, but stopping by during the week to check on her, help with groceries, fix things around her house. He said he'd started doing it because he was worried about her living alone, but it had evolved into something more meaningful for both of them. He explained that after his own grandmother died, he'd felt this huge void in his life. My grandmother had filled that space in a way he hadn't expected. He looked forward to her stories, her advice, the way she fussed over him like family. He said the free meals were nice, but that wasn't why he kept up the charade. The real kicker was when he told me my grandmother had started introducing him to her neighbours as her grandson's boyfriend. She'd been bragging about him to her bridge club, showing off pictures of the three of us together. She'd even started keeping a photo of Derek and me on her mantle, right next to the picture of her and my grandfather. Derek was crying as he told me all this, saying he knew he'd let it go too far, but didn't know how to stop without breaking her heart. He said my grandmother reminded him of his own family, the kind of unconditional love and acceptance he'd been missing since moving to the city. I didn't know whether to be angry or impressed by the whole elaborate situation he'd created. On one hand, he'd been lying to my elderly grandmother for 3 years. On the other hand, he'd been genuinely caring for her, visiting her more than I did, making her incredibly happy during what could be some of her final years. We decided we had to tell her the truth, but we wanted to do it gently. Last Sunday we sat her down after dinner and explained that while we weren't actually dating, Derek's feelings about her were completely genuine. We told her he'd like to keep visiting if she was comfortable with that their friendship meant a lot to him, even without the romantic pretense. My grandmother was quiet for a long moment, then started laughing. She said she'd suspected something was off for months, that we didn't act like any couple she'd ever seen. But she said she didn't care because Derek had become like family to her, regardless of his relationship status with me. She made us promise to keep coming for Sunday dinners. Said she'd been cooking for 2 people for so long, she didn't know how to stop. Derek teared up again and hugged her, promising he wasn't going anywhere. So now we're in this weird situation where my roommate has essentially become my grandmother's honorary grandson through an elaborate fake dating scheme. She still introduces him as Derek, my grandson's boyfriend, to new people. But now she adds, well, not really, but he might as well be family. The strangest part is that I think this whole experience has brought all 3 of us closer together. My grandmother has someone who genuinely cares about her well-being. Derek has the family connection he'd been missing, and I get to see both of them happy. Plus, I'm still getting those incredible Sunday meals. Though I have to admit, explaining this situation to people I'm actually dating has become quite the conversation starter, and that concludes that absolutely wild story. The fact that this turned into a genuine 3-way family bond is actually kind of beautiful, in the most bizarre way possible. Derek went from scamming free meals to becoming an honorary family member, complete with his own emotional breakdown about missing his grandmother. And honestly, the grandmother probably knew something was up the whole time, but was just happy to have more people to love and feed. Sometimes the best families are the ones you accidentally create through elaborate deceptions about fake relationships. This next story is going to make you question everything you think you know about online dating. I've been unknowingly dating my therapist's daughter for 2 months, and now she wants me to meet her parents. I started seeing Dr. Patricia Chen about 6 months ago to work through some anxiety issues that were affecting my job and relationships. She's been incredible, really helping me understand patterns in my behaviour and giving me tools to manage stress better. I see her every other Tuesday, and our sessions have honestly changed my life. About 2 months ago, I matched with this woman named Lisa on a dating app. Her profile was perfect, intelligent, funny, beautiful, and we had this instant connection through our messages. She's a graduate student studying social work, volunteers at an animal shelter on weekends, and has this amazing laugh that makes me forget about everything else going on in my world. Our first date was at this little coffee shop downtown, and we ended up talking for 4 hours straight. She was easy to be around, asked thoughtful questions, really listened when I spoke. I found myself opening up to her in ways I usually don't with people I've just met. By our 3rd date, I was already thinking this could be something serious. Lisa and I have been spending more and more time together. She's met my friends, I've met some of her classmates, and everything feels natural and right between us. She's supportive without being pushy, gives me space when I need it, and has this calming presence that makes my anxiety practically disappear when we're together. Last week, Lisa mentioned that she'd love for me to meet her parents. She said they'd been asking about me and that she'd told them how happy I was making her. She described her mother as this warm, caring woman who works as a therapist and really values emotional intelligence in the people her daughter dates. I was excited about meeting them, but also nervous because I really want her family to like me. Lisa assured me that her parents are understanding people who just want to see her happy. She said her mother especially would appreciate that I was someone who wasn't afraid to work on myself and address my mental health. Yesterday, Lisa texted me her parents' address and suggested we go over for dinner this Sunday. She said her mother was planning to make her famous dumplings and that her father was excited to show me his collection of vintage cameras. The address looked familiar, but I couldn't place where I'd seen it before. This morning I was driving to my therapy appointment and realised I was heading toward the same neighbourhood Lisa had mentioned. As I pulled up to Dr. Chen's office building, which is actually the converted first floor of her house, everything clicked into place. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, staring at the house number Lisa had texted me. Same number, same street, same distinctive blue door with the brass knocker. The woman I've been pouring my heart out to for months about my dating anxiety and relationship fears is the mother of the woman I'm falling in love with. During my session with Dr. Chen, I couldn't concentrate on anything. She kept asking if something was wrong, noting that I seemed distracted and agitated. I found myself studying her face, looking for resemblances to Lisa that I might have missed before. They have the same eyes, the same way of tilting their head when they're really listening to someone. Dr. Chen mentioned that her daughter had been talking about someone special lately, someone who was making her very happy. She said it was wonderful to see Lisa so excited about a relationship, that she'd been worried her daughter was too focused on school and not making time for personal connections. I nearly choked when she said Lisa's name. Dr. Chen noticed my reaction and asked if I was all right. I managed to mumble something about having a lot on my mind, but I could tell she was concerned about my sudden change in demeanour. The ethical implications of this situation are keeping me awake at night. I've shared incredibly personal information with Dr. Chen, details about my past relationships, my insecurities, my family issues, things I haven't told anyone else. She knows about my dating history, my fears about commitment, even specific things that have gone wrong in previous relationships. But she doesn't know that I'm the person her daughter has been telling her about. In our sessions, I've mentioned that I've been seeing someone new, that things are going well, but I've never used Lisa's name or given identifying details. Dr. Chen has been encouraging about this new relationship, asking how it's making me feel, whether I'm applying the communication strategies we've discussed. The weirdest part is that Dr. Chen's professional insights have actually been helping my relationship with Lisa. When Lisa and I had our first minor disagreement about scheduling, I used conflict resolution techniques Dr. Chen had taught me. When I felt myself getting anxious about how quickly things were moving, I applied mindfulness strategies from our sessions. I keep wondering if Dr. Chen has figured it out. Does she recognize details when I talk about my relationship that match what Lisa tells her at home? Has she noticed that my mood improvements coincide with her daughter's happiness? Is she professionally obligated to stop seeing me as a patient if she knows I'm dating her daughter? Lisa has been texting me about Sunday dinner, asking if I have any dietary restrictions she should tell her mother about, whether I prefer red or white wine. She's so excited for me to meet her family, and she has no idea that her mother already knows more about my psychological makeup than most people will ever know about theirs. I've been going back and forth about what to do. Part of me thinks I should tell Lisa everything before we go to dinner, explain the incredible coincidence, and let her decide how to handle it with her mother. But I'm terrified she'll think I somehow orchestrated this, that I sought her out because of her connection to Dr. Chen. Another part of me thinks I should call Dr. Chen and explain the situation, ask her how to proceed professionally. But that would mean revealing Lisa's identity, which feels like a violation of the privacy she deserves in her relationship choices. The most tempting option is to just show up on Sunday and let the chips fall where they stay. Maybe Dr. Chen will handle it gracefully. Maybe it'll become a funny family story eventually. But I'm worried about putting Lisa in an awkward position with her mother, or creating an ethical dilemma that could affect Dr. Chen's practice. What makes this even more complicated is that I genuinely care about both of these relationships. Dr. Chen has helped me become a better version of myself, and Lisa has been the beneficiary of that growth. In a weird way, my therapy sessions have prepared me to be the kind of partner Lisa deserves. But I can't shake the feeling that I'm living in some kind of psychological experiment where my therapist gets real-time updates on how well her professional advice is working in my personal life. Sunday is 3 days away, and I still have no idea what I'm going to do. That story ends right there, leaving us hanging on what might be the most awkward dinner party in human history. This is like a psychological thriller waiting to happen. Imagine sitting down to meet your girlfriend's therapist mother, who already knows your deepest fears and childhood traumas because you've been paying her to listen to them twice a month. The professional ethics alone are giving me a headache, but the real question is whether Dr. Chen has already figured it out and is just waiting to see how this dinner unfolds. Part of me hopes he just shows up and lets chaos reign, because that conversation is going to be absolutely legendary. This story takes us into truly uncharted territory. My boyfriend proposed to me using my deceased father's ring, but he bought it from a pawn shop and had no idea who it belonged to. This happened 3 weeks ago, and I'm still trying to process the emotional whirlwind this situation has created. My boyfriend Marcus and I have been together for almost 4 years. We've talked about marriage, looked at apartments together, and I genuinely thought I knew everything about this man. Turns out the universe had other plans. Marcus had been acting strange for about a month, being secretive about his phone, making mysterious trips that he'd brush off as work stuff. I figured he was planning a proposal, which was exciting and nerve-wracking in all the best ways. We talked about getting engaged before the holidays, and I'd been mentally preparing myself for the moment. My father passed away when I was 16, and my mother had kept his wedding ring in a jewellery box in her bedroom. It was a simple gold band with a small inscription inside that read, "Forever yours, Michael." My parents had this incredible love story, the kind that makes you believe in soulmates. When my mother remarried 5 years later, she kept the ring as a memento, something to remember their life together. About 2 years ago, my mother's house was broken into while she was visiting my aunt in Florida. They took electronics, some cash, and unfortunately, several pieces of jewellery, including my father's ring. The police said these types of burglaries rarely result in recovered items, since jewellery is usually sold quickly for cash. My mother was devastated, not because of the monetary value, but because it was the last physical connection she had to my father. Last month, Marcus took me to our favourite restaurant, the same place we went on our first date. He seemed nervous throughout dinner, barely touching his food, checking his watch constantly. After dessert, he got down on one knee right there in the restaurant and gave this beautiful speech about how I'd changed his life, how he couldn't imagine a future without me. Then he pulled out the ring box, and my world stopped. Inside was my father's ring, the exact same gold band, the same scratches along the edge, even what looked like the tiny dent near the inscription that had happened when my father accidentally hit it against a doorframe years ago. I started crying immediately, but not for the reasons Marcus expected. He was beaming, clearly proud of himself for finding what he thought was the perfect ring. He'd obviously spent time and effort selecting something he believed I'd love. But I was crying because seeing that ring again brought back a flood of memories about my father, the burglary, the pain my mother had felt losing that last piece of him. Through my tears, I managed to say yes, because in that moment I couldn't process enough to explain what was happening. Marcus slipped the ring onto my finger, and it fit perfectly, just like it had when I used to try it on as a kid. The inscription inside was still there, still readable, still saying, "Forever yours, Michael." After we got home that night, I sat Marcus down and told him the whole story. I explained about my father, about the ring being stolen, about how impossible it should be that he'd somehow found this specific piece of jewellery. Marcus went completely pale as I was talking, realising the magnitude of what had happened. He told me he'd bought the ring from a pawn shop downtown, the same one he'd been visiting for weeks trying to find something special. The shop owner had recommended it, saying it was a classic style that would work for any woman. Marcus had been drawn to it immediately, said something about it felt right, even though he couldn't explain why. We went to the pawn shop together the next day to get more information about where the ring had come from. The owner remembered the transaction, said someone had sold it about 18 months ago, along with several other pieces of jewellery. He couldn't provide details about the seller due to privacy policies, but he confirmed the time frame matched when my mother's house had been robbed. The ethical dilemma we're facing now is incredibly complex. Technically, this ring belongs to my mother, stolen from her home and sold illegally. But Marcus bought it legitimately from a licensed pawn shop, not knowing its history. He spent a significant amount of money on what he thought was just a vintage ring, and he purchased it with pure intentions. My mother's reaction when I told her was a mixture of joy and confusion. She was thrilled to know the ring still existed and hadn't been melted down or lost forever. But she also felt terrible that Marcus had unknowingly purchased stolen goods, and she didn't want his proposal to be tainted by this bizarre situation. Marcus immediately offered to return the ring to my mother, saying he'd find another one for our engagement. But my mother surprised us both by saying she wanted me to keep it. She said the ring finding its way back to our family through the man I was going to marry felt like a sign from my father, like he was somehow involved in bringing us together. She told us that when my father proposed to her, he'd said he wanted the ring to represent the continuation of love through generations. He'd hoped that someday, if they had children, the ring might become part of another love story. My mother said this felt like the universe fulfilling that wish in the most unexpected way possible, but I'm still struggling with the emotional complexity of the situation. Every time I look at the ring, I see my father's hands, remember him adjusting it when he worked in the garden or when he was nervous. It carries all this history and meaning that Marcus couldn't have known about when he chose it. Marcus has been incredibly understanding about my mixed feelings. He says he doesn't care about the money he spent, that what matters is that the ring makes me happy and honours my father's memory. But I can tell he's worried that our engagement will always be overshadowed by this strange coincidence, that people will focus more on the ring's history than on our commitment to each other. The pawn shop owner was fascinated by the story and offered to help us track down more information about how the ring ended up there. He said in 30 years of business, he'd never seen anything like this happen. He even offered to refund Marcus's money, but we decided that wouldn't change the fundamental questions we're facing. We've decided to keep the ring and move forward with our engagement, but we're still processing what it all means. Some days it feels magical, like my father somehow orchestrated this reunion from beyond. Other days it feels unsettling, like we're building our future on this strange foundation of coincidence and loss. My therapist says that sometimes life presents us with situations that are too meaningful to be dismissed as random chance. She thinks the ring finding its way back to me through Marcus might be a way of integrating my past with my future, allowing my father's love to bless our relationship in a way we never could have planned. Whatever the cosmic significance, I'm wearing my father's ring as my engagement ring, and it feels both completely right and completely surreal. That brings us to the end of that incredible story. The universe really said, let me orchestrate the most emotionally complex proposal possible, and just went for it. A stolen ring finding its way back to the original family through a completely innocent purchase by the daughter's future husband is the kind of thing that makes you wonder if someone upstairs is pulling strings. The fact that her mother interpreted it as a blessing from her late husband rather than a traumatic reminder just makes the whole situation even more beautiful and strange. I hope you're still hanging in there with me, because these next few stories are going to test every boundary you thought existed in modern dating. Sometimes I wonder if people are just making this stuff up, but then I remember that reality is usually stranger than fiction, especially when it comes to matters of the heart. Let me tell you about this next situation that had me questioning everything I thought I knew about long-distance relationships. My long-distance girlfriend has been sending me photos of someone else for 8 months, and I just found out she's actually my neighbour. I met Chloe on a dating app about 10 months ago. Her profile said she lived about 3 hours away in Portland, which wasn't ideal, but we hit it off so well through messaging that we decided to give long distance a try. She was studying art therapy, loved hiking, had this infectious laugh that came through even in voice messages. We'd video chat every few days, text constantly, and I was genuinely falling for her. The thing is, Chloe was always really camera shy during our video calls. She'd keep her camera off most of the time, saying she felt self-conscious or that the lighting was bad in her dorm room. When she did turn it on, it was usually just for a few minutes, and she'd position herself so I could only see part of her face. She said she was insecure about her appearance, which I completely understood and never pushed. But she'd send me photos regularly, pictures of her at coffee shops, hiking trails, art galleries, always with this gorgeous smile. Long auburn hair, bright green eyes, this kind of effortless beauty that made me feel lucky she'd chosen to be with someone like me. She had this distinctive style too, always wearing these vintage band t-shirts and layered necklaces that suited her perfectly. About 6 months in, we started talking seriously about me visiting Portland. I was ready to make the drive, book a hotel, finally meet her in person. But every time we made concrete plans, something would come up. Her roommate would get sick. She'd have a family emergency. Her car would break down. There was always a legitimate sounding reason why that particular weekend wouldn't work. I started getting frustrated, but Chloe would send me these long, heartfelt messages about how much she wanted to meet me, how she was just dealing with a lot of stress and wanted everything to be perfect when we finally saw each other. She'd send more photos to reassure me, pictures of her studying in the library, walking around campus, always looking beautiful and happy. 3 weeks ago, I was walking to my local coffee shop, the same one I go to every morning before work. There's this woman who's often there around the same time, always sitting in the corner booth with her laptop, always wearing headphones. I'd noticed her before because she has this striking look, vintage style, always seemed really focused on whatever she was working on. That morning, she was wearing a Radiohead t-shirt that looked exactly like one Chloe had sent me a photo of herself wearing. Same shirt, same layered necklaces, even the same laptop stickers I'd seen in Chloe's study photos. I did a double take, but told myself it was just a coincidence. Lots of people have similar styles. But then she turned her head to look out the window, and I saw her profile. Same nose, same jawline, same everything as the photos Chloe had been sending me. My stomach dropped. I stood there for probably 5 minutes, just staring, trying to convince myself I was imagining things. I went home and pulled up every photo Chloe had ever sent me. The coffee shop in the background of one selfie looked exactly like the one I'd just been in. The hiking trail in another photo was the same one I'd walked with friends just last month, about 10 minutes from my apartment. The art gallery photo was from a local exhibition I'd seen advertised in our neighbourhood newsletter. That evening, I called Chloe for our usual check-in. I asked her casually about her day, where she'd been, what she'd been up to. She told me she'd spent the morning studying at her favourite coffee shop, described the exact layout of the place I'd been in that morning. She mentioned seeing a really cute dog outside, and I remembered seeing that same golden retriever tied up outside when I was leaving. I didn't know what to do with this information. Was I losing my mind? Was this some incredible coincidence? I started paying more attention to the woman at the coffee shop. She was there almost every day, same schedule as mine, always in that corner booth. I began noticing things that matched details Chloe had mentioned about her life. Last week I decided to test my theory. During one of our calls, I mentioned that I was thinking of taking a photography class at the community centre downtown. Chloe got excited, said she'd always wanted to try photography too. The next day I checked the community centre's website and saw that someone with her name had just registered for the beginner photography class starting next month. I was spiralling. Either I was dealing with the most elaborate catfishing situation ever, or my long-distance girlfriend was actually my neighbour who'd been lying to me for almost a year about where she lived. Both possibilities seemed equally insane. Yesterday, I finally worked up the courage to approach her at the coffee shop. I walked over to her table, heart pounding, and said, "Excuse me, are you Chloe?" She looked up from her laptop, and I saw her face go completely white. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then she whispered, "Oh my God, you're Alex." We ended up talking for 2 hours. The truth was somehow both better and worse than I'd imagined. Her name really is Chloe. She really is studying art therapy, and everything she'd told me about herself was true. Except she lives 4 blocks away from me, not 3 hours away in Portland. She explained that she'd been planning to move to Portland for graduate school when we first matched. She'd already put Portland on her dating profile and didn't want to change it back when her plans fell through. When we started getting serious, she panicked about having lied and didn't know how to tell me the truth without ruining everything. She'd been sending me real photos of herself, but taking them around our shared neighborhood and pretending they were from Portland. She'd researched Portland locations online to have stories about places she'd supposedly been. When I wanted to visit, she'd panic because she couldn't figure out how to maintain the illusion in person. The most heartbreaking part was that she'd been seeing me around the neighborhood for months. She knew my routine, knew I came to the same coffee shop, but she was too scared to approach me because she'd built this elaborate lie that she didn't know how to undo. She started crying as she told me all this, saying she'd fallen in love with me too, but felt trapped by her own deception. She said every day she wanted to just walk up to me and confess everything, but she was terrified I'd hate her for lying. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry or be angry. Here I'd been pining for this long-distance relationship, planning trips to Portland, feeling lonely because my girlfriend lived so far away, and she'd been sitting 20 feet away from me almost every morning for months. We're trying to figure out where to go from here. The connection we built was real, even if the circumstances were completely fabricated. But I keep wondering what else she might have lied about, and she's struggling with the shame of having maintained such an elaborate deception for so long. It's been 3 days since our coffee shop confrontation, and we've texted a few times but haven't seen each other in person again. I keep going to the coffee shop at the same time, hoping she'll be there so we can talk more, but her corner booth has been empty. I don't know if we can build something real from such a fundamentally dishonest foundation, but I also can't stop thinking about the fact that she's been right here all along, and that's where that story ends. This is like the most geographically convenient catfishing situation in history. She created an elaborate long-distance relationship with someone who was literally walking past her every single day. The logistics alone are impressive, but the emotional torture of seeing him constantly while pretending to be 3 hours away must have been unbearable. I actually feel bad for both of them because the connection was real, but how do you rebuild trust after someone has been living a double life in your own neighborhood? This next one is going to make you question everything you think you know about social media relationships. I've been Instagram married to my best friend for 2 years to avoid dating questions, but now her real boyfriend wants me to be his best man. This whole situation started as a joke between me and my best friend Kate, but it's somehow evolved into the most complicated fake relationship I've ever been part of. Kate and I have been friends since college, one of those platonic relationships where people always assume we're secretly in love, but we've never had any romantic feelings for each other whatsoever. About 2 years ago, Kate was going through a really messy breakup with her ex-boyfriend Ryan. He was one of those guys who couldn't accept that things were over, constantly showing up at her apartment, calling her at work, making her life miserable. At the same time, I was dealing with my own dating drama, constantly getting set up by well-meaning friends and family members who couldn't understand why I was still single at 28. Kate came up with this brilliant solution. She suggested we become Instagram official as a couple, not actually dating, just posting photos together that looked couple-ish enough to get people off both our backs. Ryan would see that she'd moved on. My mum would stop sending me dating articles, and we could both have some peace. It started simple enough. We posted a photo of us at dinner with a caption about date night. Then a hiking photo where we were holding hands, which we'd done as friends plenty of times before, but with the right filter and caption, it looked romantic. Kate changed her relationship status. I started commenting heart emojis on her posts, and suddenly everyone assumed we were together. The plan worked perfectly. Ryan stopped bothering Kate. My family stopped asking about my love life, and we could hang out without people making weird comments about when we were going to get together. We'd gotten so good at the fake relationship performance that even close friends started believing it. Over the past 2 years, we've documented this entire fake romance on social media. Anniversary posts, birthday tributes, couple Halloween costumes, vacation photos that look like romantic getaways but were just friend trips with strategic cropping. We've gotten hundreds of comments about how cute we are together, how we're relationship goals, how lucky we are to have found each other. The problem started about 6 months ago when Kate met David at a work conference. They hit it off immediately, and she was genuinely excited about him in a way I hadn't seen since before her disaster relationship with Ryan. But she couldn't just start dating someone publicly because, according to Instagram, she was in a committed relationship with me. Kate and David started seeing each other secretly. She'd tell people she was hanging out with me, but she'd actually be on dates with David. She'd post photos of us together to maintain the illusion, then delete them later so David wouldn't see them when they eventually went public. David knew about our fake relationship from the beginning. Kate told him the whole story on their second date, and he thought it was hilarious. He said he'd never met anyone who'd gone to such elaborate lengths to avoid dating drama, and he was impressed by our commitment to the bit. 3 months ago, Kate and David decided they were ready to go public with their relationship. We planned this whole elaborate Instagram breakup. I posted a story about how sometimes people grow apart. Kate posted about remaining friends after a relationship ends, and we changed our relationship statuses back to single. The response was immediate and dramatic. Kate's mum called crying, asking what had happened and whether they could fix things. My sister showed up at my apartment with ice cream and wine, ready to help me through the heartbreak. Mutual friends were taking sides, trying to figure out who was at fault for the breakup. We had to stick to the story. Kate and I pretended to be going through a difficult post-breakup adjustment period. We stopped posting photos together, stopped commenting on each other's posts, even avoided hanging out in public for a few weeks to sell the illusion. After a month of fake heartbreak, Kate slowly started posting photos with David. She introduced him as a friend at first, then gradually let their relationship status become clear. People were supportive, happy that she'd found someone new, though some commented about how quickly she'd moved on from me. David and Kate have been publicly together for 3 months now, and they're completely smitten with each other. He's everything Ryan wasn't: supportive, funny, genuinely cares about Kate's happiness. I've gotten to know him through group hangouts, and he's become a real friend. Last week, David asked if we could grab lunch, just the two of us. I figured he wanted to talk about Kate, maybe ask for advice about gift ideas or something. Instead, he told me he was planning to propose to Kate next month. He'd already bought a ring, planned this elaborate proposal involving her favourite hiking trail and all her closest friends. Then he asked me to be his best man. I was completely stunned. David explained that while he has college buddies and work friends, none of them really know Kate or understand how important this relationship is to him. He said I was the person who knew Kate best, who'd been there through her worst relationship, and who'd helped her find the confidence to trust someone new again. He said he knew our Instagram relationship was fake, but our friendship was real, and he wanted the person who cared most about Kate's happiness to stand beside him when he married her. He said it felt right to have me there, since I'd been Kate's fake boyfriend, to officially hand her over to her real one. I was touched but also completely overwhelmed by the weirdness of the situation. How do you explain to wedding guests that the best man is the bride's fake ex-boyfriend? How do we handle the fact that half the people at the wedding will remember our Instagram romance and wonder about the dynamics. Kate was thrilled when David told her about asking me to be his best man. She said it felt perfect, like our fake relationship was finally serving its ultimate purpose by bringing her to David. She wants me to give a speech about how I knew David was the right guy for her, how I could see their real love compared to our performed one. But I'm worried about the logistics. David's family doesn't know about our fake relationship, but Kate's family lived through our entire Instagram romance. Her parents still ask me how I'm doing after the breakup, whether I'm dating anyone new. Her grandmother keeps commenting on my Facebook posts, asking when I'm going to find a nice girl like Kate. The bachelor party is going to be especially weird. David wants to invite some of Kate's male friends, including guys who think I'm her ex-boyfriend. How do I navigate those conversations? Do I pretend to be completely over her? Do I act supportive of their relationship in a way that might seem suspicious? And then there's the wedding itself. I'll be standing at the altar watching my fake ex-girlfriend marry someone else, giving a speech about their love story that I was indirectly responsible for creating. The whole thing feels like a romantic comedy that's gotten way too meta. Kate and David are so happy together that I can't bring myself to say no, but I also can't figure out how to say yes without creating the most confusing wedding in history. David keeps joking that our fake relationship was just elaborate matchmaking, that I was setting Kate up for him all along without knowing it. The wedding is in 4 months, and I still haven't given David an answer about being his best man. And there's the end of that wonderfully complex story. The fact that their fake Instagram relationship was so convincing that it's now creating real-world complications at an actual wedding is peak modern dating chaos. David asking his girlfriend's fake ex-boyfriend to be his best man because he's actually her real best friend is the kind of twisted logic that somehow makes perfect sense. I hope he says yes, because that best man speech is going to be legendary. And someone needs to document this entire situation for posterity. Our next story takes us into territory that makes online dating look simple by comparison. I found out my wife of 3 years has been living a completely different life during her business trips, and she has no idea that I know. My wife Jennifer travels for work about twice a month, usually gone for 3 to 5 days at a time. She's a marketing consultant for tech companies, and her job requires her to visit client offices across the country. I've always been supportive of her career, even though I miss her when she's away. She's passionate about her work, and seeing her succeed has always made me proud. About 6 months ago, I noticed Jennifer seemed different when she came back from trips. Not bad different, just more energetic, more social, like she'd been recharged by whatever had happened while she was away. She'd come home with stories about amazing restaurants, interesting people she'd met, cultural experiences in whatever city she'd visited. I started joking that she was living this glamorous jet-setter life while I was home eating cereal for dinner and watching Netflix. She'd laugh and say business travel wasn't as exciting as it seemed, that most of her time was spent in conference rooms and hotel rooms, but there was something in her eyes when she talked about her trips, a kind of excitement that I hadn't seen in our day-to-day life together. 3 months ago, Jennifer came home from a trip to Austin with this incredible energy. She was talking about the music scene, the food, how vibrant and creative the city felt. She showed me photos of street art, local bands, quirky bars that looked nothing like the corporate environments where she usually worked. I asked her when she'd had time to explore so much of the city, since her trips were usually packed with meetings. She said she'd extended her stay by a day to decompress, which was something she'd never done before. She seemed almost guilty about it, like she was confessing to playing hooky from school. That night, while she was unpacking, I noticed things in her suitcase that seemed out of place, clothes I'd never seen before, more casual and artsy than her usual business wardrobe, a festival wristband that she hadn't mentioned, receipts from places that weren't near her client's office. I didn't say anything, but I started paying more attention. Over the next few trips, Jennifer would come back with stories and photos that didn't quite match what I'd expect from someone spending their time in corporate boardrooms. She'd mention concerts she'd attended, art galleries she'd visited, people she'd met who seemed to have nothing to do with tech marketing. Last month, Jennifer went to Portland for what was supposed to be a 3-day client meeting. She called me each night like usual, telling me about her meetings, complaining about the hotel food, saying she missed me and couldn't wait to get home. But something about her voice sounded different, more animated than usual. When she got back, she was glowing. She talked about Portland like it was the most amazing place she'd ever been. Showed me photos of food trucks and vintage shops and live music venues. She said she'd fallen in love with the city's creative energy, that it had inspired her to think differently about her own life. That weekend, she suggested we plan a vacation to Portland together. She wanted to show me all the places she'd discovered, introduce me to the side of the city that tourists never see. She was more excited about this trip idea than she'd been about anything in months. 2 weeks ago, I was doing our taxes and needed to find some receipts from Jennifer's business trips. She keeps all her travel documents in a folder in our home office, organised by date and location. As I was looking through the Portland folder, I found something that made my stomach drop. There were 2 plane tickets. One was her usual business class ticket booked by her company. The other was a coach ticket she'd apparently bought herself, leaving 2 days earlier than her business trip was supposed to start. She'd extended her Portland trip by 2 days, but she'd told me she was only going for 3 days total. I started going through other trip folders. Austin had extra hotel receipts for dates before her business meetings. Seattle had restaurant charges from a week when she was supposed to be home. Every city for the past 6 months showed signs of extended stays that she hadn't told me about. But the receipts weren't just for extra days. They were for completely different experiences than what she'd described. Expensive dinners at romantic restaurants, tickets to couples activities, hotel charges for upgraded rooms with amenities that didn't make sense for solo business travel. I felt sick. All the evidence pointed to Jennifer having affairs in different cities, creating this elaborate secret life while pretending to be on business trips. But something about the receipts didn't quite fit that theory either. The activities seemed more focused on experiences than romance, more about exploring culture than meeting people. Last week, I did something I'm not proud of. I created a fake social media account and started searching for Jennifer's name in the cities she'd visited. I found her almost immediately on Instagram, but under a completely different username than her real account. Her secret Instagram was like looking into an alternate universe. Photos of her at music festivals, art openings, underground comedy shows, always alone, but always smiling in this uninhibited way I rarely saw at home. She was dressed differently, styled differently, even seemed to carry herself differently. The captions on her posts were like reading about a completely different person. She talked about feeling alive for the first time in years, about discovering parts of herself she'd forgotten existed. She wrote about the freedom of being anonymous in a new city, of being able to reinvent herself without anyone's expectations. She'd been documenting this entire parallel life, but keeping it completely separate from our marriage. In Portland, she was Luna, who went to poetry readings and danced at underground clubs. In Austin, she was part of a temporary artist collective. In Seattle, she'd joined a hiking group and spent days exploring mountains. Reading through months of posts, I realized Jennifer wasn't having affairs. She was having an affair with herself, with a version of herself that she felt like she couldn't be in our regular life together. She was using business trips as opportunities to live as this completely different person, then coming home and resuming her role as my wife and successful marketing consultant. The most heartbreaking part was reading her posts about feeling guilty for being so happy. She'd write about loving these experiences, but feeling like she was betraying something or someone by enjoying them so much. She'd talk about wishing she could integrate these parts of herself into her real life, but not knowing how. I've been sitting on this information for a week, not knowing what to do with it. Jennifer isn't cheating on me with another person, but she's created this entire secret identity that she apparently feels like she can't share with me. She's been living a double life, not because she wants to hurt me, but because she feels like she needs to escape from the life we've built together. The woman in those Instagram posts looks happier and more alive than I've seen Jennifer in years, but she's also a stranger to me. I don't know Luna, who goes to poetry readings and stays out until dawn at music festivals. I know Jennifer, who comes home exhausted from business trips and falls asleep watching television. Jennifer has another trip planned for next week, this time to Denver. Part of me wants to confront her before she leaves, to ask her why she feels like she needs to become someone else when she travels. But another part of me is afraid that exposing her secret life will destroy whatever happiness she's found in it. I keep wondering what it says about our marriage, that my wife feels like she needs to invent an alter ego to feel fulfilled. Are we so disconnected that she can't be her authentic self around me? Have I somehow made her feel like she needs to hide the parts of herself that make her happiest? She leaves for Denver tomorrow, and I still don't know whether I'm going to say anything or just pretend I never found out about Luna. That's the end of that emotionally complex situation. This isn't about infidelity in the traditional sense, but it might be even more heartbreaking because she's essentially cheating with a version of herself that she feels like she can't be at home. The fact that she's documenting this entire parallel existence while feeling guilty about how happy it makes her suggests that something fundamental is missing from their marriage. He's going to have to decide whether to confront this or let her keep living as Luna, but either way, they need to figure out why she feels like she can't be authentically herself in their relationship. These next few stories will probably catch you off guard at certain points. My girlfriend has been secretly learning my native language for 2 years, and I just found out in the most embarrassing way possible. I'm 26, she's 24, and we've been together for 3 years. I'm originally from Romania, but moved to the US when I was 12. My English is pretty much perfect now, but I still speak Romanian with my family when we call or visit. Jessica has always been curious about my background and culture, but I never thought she was seriously interested in learning the language. It's not exactly the most popular choice for Americans to pick up. Whenever my mum would call and I'd switch to Romanian, Jessica would just smile and continue whatever she was doing. Sometimes she'd ask what we talked about, and I'd give her the basics. Here's where it gets interesting. My family has this tradition where we're pretty blunt about relationships, like brutally honest about whether we think someone is right for our relatives. I always knew they'd be sizing up Jessica, but I figured I was safe since she couldn't understand what they were saying. So last month, my parents came to visit for the first time since Jessica and I moved in together. Everything was going great. We were having dinner. Everyone seemed to be getting along. My mum was asking Jessica about her job. My dad was showing her photos from back home. Very wholesome family bonding time. Then my mum and dad started talking to each other in Romanian, while Jessica was in the kitchen getting dessert. This is where I made my mistake. I joined in their conversation, and we started discussing Jessica, but not in a mean way. Actually, the complete opposite. My mum was saying how much she liked Jessica, how she could tell Jessica made me happy, how she hoped we'd get married soon. My dad was agreeing, saying he thought she was perfect for me, and that he hadn't seen me this content in years. Then my mum said something that made me laugh, about how Jessica was probably the first girlfriend I'd brought home who didn't make her want to hide the good silverware. We were all chuckling about this when Jessica walked back in with the cake. She set it down, looked at all three of us, and said in perfect Romanian, "I promise I won't steal the silverware, but I can't make the same promise about your son." The silence that followed was deafening. My parents' faces went through about 5 different emotions in the span of 10 seconds. I think I actually choked on my wine. Jessica just stood there, with this huge grin on her face, clearly proud of herself for pulling off what might be the most elaborate surprise in relationship history. Turns out she's been taking Romanian lessons online for almost 2 years. She started right after my cousin's wedding when she realised how left out she felt, not understanding what my family was saying. She'd been practicing pronunciation by listening to our phone calls and had apparently reached the point where she could follow most conversations. She understood everything we'd said about her. Not just that night, but probably dozens of previous conversations. Every time my mum called to ask if I was treating Jessica well, every time my dad would tell me not to mess things up with this one, every time they'd switch to Romanian to discuss whether they thought she was marriage material. The embarrassing part isn't that we said anything bad about her. The embarrassing part is that my family has apparently been planning our wedding for months and discussing it openly because they thought she couldn't understand. My mum had already started researching Romanian wedding traditions she wanted to incorporate. My dad had been asking my uncle about venues back home in case we wanted a ceremony there. Jessica knew all of this and just let us keep talking. She said she wanted to wait until she was confident enough to have a full conversation before revealing her secret. She'd actually been planning to surprise me on my birthday next month, but couldn't resist the perfect moment. Now my parents are completely obsessed with her. My mum has already switched to calling Jessica directly, instead of going through me. And they have these long conversations in Romanian that I'm not even included in. My dad sent her a Romanian cookbook and has been texting her recipes. The weirdest part is adjusting to not having that private language anymore. I can't complain about work to my mum without Jessica chiming in with advice. I can't tell my dad about some stupid argument Jessica and I had without her defending herself in fluent Romanian. But honestly, I've never been more attracted to her. The dedication it took to secretly learn an entire language just to better connect with my family is insane. She literally spent 2 years working toward this moment, and the way she revealed it was so perfectly timed and confident. We're definitely getting married. My mum has already made that very clear in both languages. That story just ended, and wow, imagine spending 2 years secretly learning someone's language just to surprise them. That's either incredibly romantic or mildly terrifying, depending on how you look at it. But the fact that she held back for the perfect moment and then delivered that comeback about stealing the sun instead of the silverware. Chef's kiss. That's the kind of long-term planning that either builds the strongest relationships or the most elaborate revenge plots. Speaking of surprises that change everything, this next story takes a completely different turn. I accidentally became the other woman and didn't find out until I was already in love. I'm 28 and I met David at a coffee shop 6 months ago. He was reading this obscure philosophy book that I'd written my thesis on. So I struck up a conversation. We talked for 3 hours straight about everything from existentialism to terrible Netflix shows. He asked for my number and we started texting constantly. Our first official date was incredible. He took me to this tiny bookstore that stayed open late and we wandered around reading passages to each other from random books. It sounds cheesy, but it was magical. The thing is, David was always a little mysterious about his schedule. He could only see me on certain days, usually weekdays and never on weekends. When I asked about it, he said he worked weird hours in consulting and had to travel a lot for clients. It seemed reasonable enough. He never wanted me to come to his place, always insisted on coming to mine or meeting somewhere neutral. Again, he said his apartment was temporary while he looked for something better, and he was embarrassed by it. I thought he was just being self-conscious. The red flag I ignored was that he never posted anything about me on social media, like nothing. I'd tag him in things and he'd like them but never shared anything himself. When I brought it up, he said he liked keeping his personal life private and preferred living in the moment rather than documenting everything. All of these things seemed like minor quirks, not deal breakers. He was attentive, thoughtful, remembered every detail about things I told him. He'd show up with my favourite pastries from this bakery across town, leave little notes in books he'd lend me, send me photos of things throughout the day that reminded him of me. I was falling hard, like, planning our future together, wondering if he was the one kind of falling. We'd started saying, "I love you," talking about trips we wanted to take together, discussing moving in together once his lease was up. Then last Tuesday happened. I was having lunch with my co-worker Rachel when she suddenly grabbed my arm and pointed across the restaurant. She was staring at David, who was sitting in a corner booth with a woman and 2 young kids. My first thought was maybe it was his sister and her children. But then the woman leaned over and kissed him. Not a friendly peck, a real kiss, and he kissed her back. One of the kids, who couldn't have been more than 5, climbed into his lap and started showing him drawings from what looked like school art class. I felt like I was going to throw up. Rachel was asking if I was okay, but I couldn't process what I was seeing. David was being so natural with them, so comfortable. He was cutting up the little boy's food, wiping the girl's face, having what looked like a completely normal family lunch. I sat there for 20 minutes just watching them. The way he interacted with those kids, it was clear they knew him well. The woman was showing him something on her phone, and they were both laughing. She was wearing a wedding ring. He wasn't, but then again, he never wore any jewellery when he was with me either. When they got up to leave, I saw David help the woman with her coat and hold the door for his family. His family, because that's obviously what they were. I went home and immediately started going through his social media accounts like a detective. His Instagram was pretty sparse, but I found photos from 2 years ago that he hadn't deleted, pictures with the same woman, tagged at various coupley locations. Her account was private, but her profile picture showed her with the 2 kids. Then I found his Facebook, which he apparently forgot he had. Relationship status, married, tagged in dozens of family photos going back years. Birthday posts from the woman calling him her husband and father of her children. Check-ins at kid birthday parties, school events, family vacations. I had been dating a married father of 2 for 6 months and had no idea. The worst part was that I still loved him, even sitting there with all the evidence in front of me. My first instinct wasn't anger, it was heartbreak. Because the David I knew, the one who stayed up until 3 a.m, talking to me about our fears and dreams, who remembered that I liked my coffee with oat milk and cinnamon, who quoted my favourite poets in random text messages. That person felt real, but he wasn't real, was he? He was just the version of himself he could be when he wasn't being a husband and father. I called him that night. I didn't even let him say hello, just started with, "I know you're married." The silence on the other end lasted forever. Then he said my name, just once, in this broken voice that somehow made everything worse. He didn't deny it. He said he'd been trying to figure out how to tell me, that he'd never meant for it to go this far, that his marriage had been over emotionally for years, even though they were still living together for the kids. All the classic lines that I'm sure every cheating husband has used since the beginning of time. But here's the thing that really messed me up. When he was explaining himself, he was crying. Actually crying. He said he'd fallen in love with me too, that being with me had shown him what he'd been missing, that he was planning to ask his wife for a divorce but wanted to do it the right way. Part of me wanted to believe him. The part that remembered how he looked at me, how he touched me, how he seemed genuinely interested in every mundane detail of my life. But the rational part of me knew that if he could lie to his wife for 6 months, he could lie to me too. I told him I never wanted to see him again and hung up. Then I blocked him on everything and deleted his number. But I kept all his notes, all the books he gave me, because I couldn't bring myself to throw away the only proof I had that what we felt was real. It's been 3 weeks and I still miss him every day. I know I'm supposed to be angry at him for lying to me, and I am, but I'm also angry at myself for falling for someone who wasn't available, and I'm angry at the situation for being so complicated. I keep wondering about his wife. Does she know? Does she suspect? Are they actually getting divorced, or was that just another lie? I found myself wanting to message her, but what would I even say? The hardest part is that I can't talk about this with most of my friends, because they'll just say, I should have known, that the signs were obvious. And maybe they were, but when you're falling in love, You want to believe the best about someone. I don't know if I'm looking for advice or just need to tell someone who won't judge me. I feel like I lost someone I loved and gained the knowledge that I'm capable of being complicit in hurting a stranger and her children. Jesus, that story was brutal on every level. There's no good guy in that situation, just different degrees of hurt people making messy decisions. The worst part is you can feel how genuine her feelings were, and how genuine his probably were too, which somehow makes it more tragic than if it was just some casual fling. When someone says they were planning to leave their marriage anyway, that's usually code for, I was never planning to leave my marriage, but who knows. Either way, those kids and that wife are the real victims here. Let me lighten the mood slightly with this next one, though I use the term lighten very loosely. My roommate has been stealing my identity to catfish people online, and I only found out because one of her victims showed up at our apartment. I'm 25, she's 23, and we've been living together for 8 months. Cara seemed normal when we met through a roommate app. Clean, quiet, paid her bills on time, never brought random people over. Perfect roommate material. About 3 months ago, I started noticing weird things. People would stare at me when I was out running errands, like they recognised me but couldn't place where from. A few times someone would wave or try to start a conversation, and I'd have no idea who they were. I figured maybe I just had one of those faces. Then my neighbour asked me how my modelling career was going. I laughed and told him I wasn't a model, never had been. He looked confused and said he'd seen my photos online, that I was really talented. When I pressed him for details, he got embarrassed and changed the subject. I started paying more attention to Cara's behaviour. She was always on her phone, constantly taking selfies, but never posting anything on her own social media accounts that I could see. She'd get packages delivered almost daily, always beauty products and clothes, which seemed weird since she worked retail and was always complaining about money. The breaking point came last Saturday. I was home alone, binge-watching Netflix in my pyjamas, when someone started pounding on our door. Not knocking, pounding. I looked through the peephole and saw this guy I'd never seen before, maybe mid-30s, holding flowers and looking frantic. I cracked the door open with the chain still on and asked what he wanted. He said my name, my actual name, and started crying, like full breakdown sobbing. He said he'd driven 6 hours to see me, that we'd been talking for months, and he was in love with me. I told him he had the wrong person, that I'd never seen him before in my life. He pulled out his phone and started showing me screenshots of conversations. Messages that were definitely flirty, definitely romantic, and definitely not from me. But they were under my name, with photos of me. The photos were ones I'd posted on Instagram, but also ones I'd never seen before. Pictures of me sleeping, pictures taken from outside my work, pictures of me through our apartment window that I definitely didn't know existed. This man, Trevor, had been talking to what he thought was me for 4 months. They'd planned this visit weeks in advance. He'd taken time off work, booked a hotel room, bought an engagement ring. An engagement ring? He was planning to propose to someone he'd never actually met, using my face and my name. I let him in, and we went through his phone together. The person pretending to be me had created an elaborate backstory. I was supposedly a freelance photographer who travelled a lot for work, which explained why I couldn't meet up before now. I was an only child whose parents died in a car accident, which explained why I never talked about family. I was recovering from a bad relationship and taking things slow, which explained why we'd never video chatted. All of these details were things Cara would have known about me, from living together and casual conversations. She'd taken the basic facts of my life and created a whole fictional version of me. The worst part was reading the conversations. They weren't just casual flirting, they were deep emotional exchanges. This woman, using my identity, had convinced Trevor that they had this profound connection. She'd comforted him through his divorce, celebrated his promotion at work, helped him through his dad's cancer diagnosis. Trevor was devastated when I explained what was happening. He kept saying he couldn't understand how someone could be so cruel, that the person he'd been talking to seemed so genuine and caring. I felt horrible for him, but also violated in a way I couldn't even process. I called the police while Trevor was there. They took a report but said this kind of catfishing was hard to prosecute unless money was involved. They suggested I change all my social media settings and consider a restraining order against Cara. When Cara got home that night, I confronted her immediately. I showed her Trevor's phone, demanded an explanation. At first she tried to deny it, said maybe someone else was using my photos. But when I mentioned specific details from the conversations that only she would know, she broke down. She said she'd started catfishing people because she was lonely and insecure about her appearance. She thought using my photos would just be temporary, just until she built up confidence to use her own. But then people started responding positively, and she got addicted to the attention. She'd been juggling multiple fake relationships using my identity. Trevor was just one of 7 men she'd been stringing along, some for months, some for over a year. She had spreadsheets to keep track of the lies she'd told each person. The part that made me sick was that she'd been taking photos of me without my knowledge for months. She had hundreds of pictures of me sleeping, showering, changing clothes, just living my normal life. She'd been selling some of them online and using others to maintain her fake relationships. I moved out the next day. I'm staying with my sister while I figure out next steps legally. I've had to make all my social media completely private, and I'm constantly paranoid that someone's going to approach me thinking they know me. The saddest part is Trevor. He asked if he could stay in touch with the real me, not because he was interested romantically, but because he felt like he needed closure. We've exchanged a few messages, and he seems like a genuinely nice guy who got caught up in someone else's twisted game. I keep thinking about the other men Cara was manipulating. How many Trevors are out there, thinking they're in love with me, planning visits or worse? I've tried to track down the fake profiles, but she's deleted everything, and I don't have enough information to warn them. Story's over. That's absolutely nightmare fuel. The level of violation here goes so far beyond normal roommate drama. This woman literally stole her identity, sold intimate photos, and created fake emotional relationships with multiple people. And the fact that Trevor seems like a decent guy who got emotionally destroyed just makes it worse. Some people really will do anything for attention, even if it means ruining multiple lives in the process. Here's something that'll make you question dating apps forever. I matched with someone on a dating app who turned out to be my therapist's daughter, and now my entire support system is compromised. I'm 29, and I've been seeing Dr. Martinez for anxiety and relationship issues for about 2 years. She's been amazing, really helped me work through some childhood trauma and build healthier patterns in dating. Last month I was swiping through Bumble when I came across this gorgeous woman named Sophia. Great smile, interesting bio. Seemed like we'd have a lot in common. We matched immediately and started chatting. The conversation flowed naturally. She was funny and smart, and we decided to meet for coffee that weekend. The date was fantastic. We talked for hours about books, travel, our careers. She mentioned she was in graduate school for psychology, which I thought was cool, since I'd been in therapy and had a lot of respect for the field. We had this immediate chemistry that I hadn't felt with anyone in years. We went on 3 more dates over the next 2 weeks. Each one was better than the last. We had similar senses of humour, compatible values, amazing physical chemistry. I was starting to think she might be someone special. Then came my regular therapy appointment with Dr. Martinez. I was telling her about this new woman I'd been seeing, how excited I was about the connection, how different it felt from my previous relationships. Dr. Martinez was asking her usual thoughtful questions, helping me process why this felt different. Midway through the session, I was describing our second date when Dr. Martinez's face changed. She got this weird expression and asked me to describe Sophia physically. When I did, she went completely pale. She asked if I had a photo. I showed her Sophia's profile picture, and Dr. Martinez just stared at it for the longest time. Then she said we needed to stop the session and that she had to make a phone call. I was confused but figured maybe she had an emergency with another client. She stepped out for a few minutes, and when she came back, she looked like she'd seen a ghost. That's when she told me. Sophia was her daughter. The silence in that room was deafening. I felt like the world had shifted sideways. This woman I'd been dating, this person I was developing real feelings for, was the daughter of the therapist who knew literally everything about my psychological issues, my dating history, my deepest insecurities. Dr. Martinez explained that she'd recognized the details of our dates because Sophia had been telling her about this great guy she'd met. Neither of them had put the pieces together until that moment because Sophia only knew my first name from the app, and Dr. Martinez obviously couldn't share details about her clients. The ethical implications hit me immediately. Dr. Martinez had access to information about my mental health, my relationship patterns, my family trauma, information that could theoretically influence how she advised her daughter about dating me. Even if she never shared it directly, she knew things about me that Sophia didn't. Dr. Martinez said she needed to refer me to another therapist immediately. She couldn't continue treating me while I was dating her daughter. It was a massive conflict of interest. She seemed genuinely upset about it, said she hated having to end our therapeutic relationship when we'd made so much progress. But the worst part was figuring out what to tell Sophia. I couldn't explain why we suddenly couldn't see each other without revealing that I'd been in therapy, which felt like too much personal information for someone I'd only been dating for a few weeks. I tried to be vague at first, told her something had come up, that the timing wasn't right, that I needed to focus on some personal stuff. She was confused and hurt, said everything had seemed to be going so well between us. When she pressed for a real explanation, I ended up telling her the truth, that I'd been seeing a therapist for a while and had just discovered it was her mother. She was shocked, then mortified, then angry that neither of us had figured it out sooner. Sophia said she understood why we couldn't keep dating, but she was upset about losing what felt like a real connection. She also felt weird about the fact that her mum knew intimate details about someone she'd been sleeping with. The whole thing has been a disaster. I lost my therapist, who I'd built a real relationship with over 2 years. I lost a potential romantic partner who I was genuinely excited about. And now I have to start over with a new therapist and explain this entire bizarre situation. Dr. Martinez did refer me to a colleague, but it's frustrating having to rebuild that trust and therapeutic relationship from scratch. The new therapist is fine, but she's not Dr. Martinez, and I'd made real progress that now feels interrupted. Sophia and I texted a few times after everything came out, but it was too awkward. We both agreed it was better to just let it go, even though we both admitted we were disappointed about what could have been. The weirdest part is wondering what would have happened if we'd never figured it out. Would we have kept dating? Would it have gotten serious? Would Dr. Martinez have eventually had to tell us or just lived with the conflict of interest? I've been thinking about moving to a different city just to avoid the possibility of running into either of them. It's a small world, and the dating scene here isn't that big. The whole thing has made me paranoid about matching with anyone else online. That story just ended. Talk about a cosmic joke. The odds of matching with your therapist's daughter in a city full of people has to be astronomical, but of course it happened to someone who's already dealing with relationship anxiety. Now he's lost both his therapist and a promising relationship in one fell swoop. The universe really has a twisted sense of humour sometimes. This next one is going to make you never want to live with roommates again. My roommate has been gaslighting me about our shared expenses, and I just discovered she's been stealing money from our joint account for months. I'm 26, she's 28, and we've been living together for a year and a half. When we first moved in together, Jenna suggested we open a joint checking account for shared expenses like rent, utilities, groceries, and household supplies. We'd each deposit our portion every month and use the account to pay bills. It seemed like a smart system. and worked well for the first year. We split everything 50-50, kept receipts, and generally had a good handle on our shared finances. Jenna was always the one who managed the account, since she was better with numbers, and I trusted her completely. Around 3 months ago, I started noticing that our grocery bills seemed higher than usual. When I asked Jenna about it, she said prices had gone up everywhere, and showed me receipts for expensive organic items and specialty products. I didn't think much of it since inflation has been crazy, and I'd been working longer hours, so I wasn't doing the shopping myself. Then our utility bills started climbing. Jenna explained that we'd been using more electricity and water, maybe because I'd been working from home more often. Again, it seemed reasonable, even though I hadn't really changed my habits that much. The thing that made me suspicious was when she told me we needed to increase our monthly contributions to the joint account. She said our expenses had gone up by about $300 per month, and we each needed to deposit an extra $150. It seemed steep, but I didn't want to be difficult about shared costs. Last week I was cleaning the kitchen and found a stack of receipts that had fallen behind the coffee maker. Most were normal grocery receipts, but a few were for things that seemed weird. Expensive skincare products, designer clothing, restaurant meals that I definitely hadn't eaten. I started paying more attention to Jenna's spending habits. She'd been getting a lot of packages delivered, wearing new clothes I'd never seen before, talking about restaurants she'd been trying. When I asked how she could afford all this on her salary, she said she'd gotten a raise at work, but something still felt off. I decided to check our joint account balance online, something I hadn't done in months since Jenna always handled the statements. What I found made my stomach drop. There were dozens of withdrawals I didn't recognize. ATM withdrawals, online purchases, transfers to accounts I'd never heard of. The account that should have had a healthy balance for our shared expenses was nearly empty. I printed out 3 months of statements and went through them line by line. Jenna had been using our joint account like her personal checking account. She'd bought clothes, paid for dinners out, even made payments on what looked like a car loan. The total amount she'd stolen was over $4,000. Money that was supposed to be for our rent, utilities, and shared living expenses had been funding her lifestyle, while she convinced me we needed to contribute more to cover rising costs. When I confronted her with the bank statements, she tried to gaslight me immediately, said I was being paranoid, that I'd agreed to those purchases, that some of the charges were for things we'd both used. She claimed the skincare products were for both of us, that the restaurant charges were for meals she'd brought home to share, but I had receipts that proved otherwise, literally. The skincare products were brands I was allergic to. The restaurant charges were from places across town that I'd never been to, on dates when I was provably at work or out with other friends. She kept insisting that I was remembering wrong, that I'd said it was okay to use the account for certain personal things. She made me feel like I was going crazy, questioning my own memory of conversations we'd had about the account. The breaking point was when she accused me of being controlling and cheap, said I was trying to micromanage her spending, and that roommates were supposed to trust each other. She actually turned it around and made me feel guilty for checking the account statements. But the numbers didn't lie. $4,000 gone with nothing to show for it in our shared living space. Meanwhile, she'd been telling me we needed to budget more carefully and cut back on expenses. I closed the joint account immediately and opened a new one in just my name, told Jenna she could pay me directly for her portion of shared expenses from now on. She threw a fit, said I was being unreasonable, and that she'd pay me back gradually. That was 2 weeks ago, and she hasn't paid me back a cent. In fact, she's been acting like the victim in this whole situation. She told our mutual friends that I'd accused her of stealing and that I was creating drama over minor expenses. Some of our friends have taken her side, saying that roommate financial disputes happen all the time, and I should be more understanding. They don't know the full extent of what she did, and Jenna has been careful to frame it as a misunderstanding rather than theft. I'm moving out at the end of the month. I can't live with someone who stole from me and then tried to convince me I was imagining it. The trust is completely broken, and I don't think there's any way to repair it. The worst part is that I genuinely liked Jenna as a person before this happened. We had fun together, got along well, seemed like compatible roommates. Finding out she was capable of this level of deception has made me question my judgment about people in general. I'm not sure if I should pursue legal action or just chalk it up as an expensive lesson learned. $4,000 is a lot of money, but proving theft might be difficult since it was technically a joint account. That's the end of that story. $4,000 and months of psychological manipulation over shared expenses. The audacity of stealing someone's money and then making them feel crazy for questioning it is truly next level. And of course, she's playing the victim to mutual friends, because that's what manipulators do when they get caught. Some people really will gaslight you about anything, even basic math. If you're still hanging in there with me through all these relationship horror stories, hit that subscribe button, because apparently we're all just here for the chaos of other people's dating lives. And I've got plenty more where these came from. This next story is going to make you reconsider every casual hookup you've ever had. I hooked up with someone at a party, and 3 months later, she showed up at my workplace claiming to be pregnant with my child. I'm 24, and this happened back in April at my friend's birthday party. There was this girl there, Melissa, who I'd never met before, but we hit it off immediately. We spent most of the night talking and ended up going back to my place. It was supposed to be a one-night thing. We exchanged numbers the next morning, but only texted a few times over the following weeks. Nothing serious, just casual check-ins. She seemed cool, but we were both clear that neither of us was looking for anything serious. Then in July, completely out of nowhere, Melissa showed up at my office. I work at a marketing firm downtown, and she somehow found out where I worked and just appeared in our lobby asking for me. My receptionist called back confused, saying there was someone there claiming to have important personal business to discuss. When I went out to meet her, Melissa looked different, more serious, kind of frantic. She asked if we could talk privately, and I took her to one of our small conference rooms. That's when she dropped the bomb. She said she was pregnant and that I was the father. My brain completely short-circuited. We'd used protection, I was sure of it. I asked her if she was certain, and she said she'd taken multiple tests and even been to a doctor. Then she started talking about what we were going to do about it. Not asking, telling, she said she'd decided to keep the baby and that she expected me to be involved financially and emotionally. She had this whole plan mapped out about how we'd co-parent and what kind of support she'd need from me. I was in complete shock. This woman I'd slept with once 3 months ago was sitting in my workplace telling me I was going to be a father and making decisions about our future without any input from me. I told her I needed time to process this and asked if we could meet later to talk more. She gave me her number again and said she'd expect to hear from me within a few days about how I wanted to handle things. After she left, I couldn't focus on anything. I kept replaying that night in April, trying to remember every detail. I was pretty sure we'd been careful, but alcohol was involved and maybe something had gone wrong. I called my best friend and told him what happened. He immediately said something felt off about the whole situation. Why would she wait 3 months to tell me? Why show up at my work instead of calling first? Why did she seem to have everything planned out already? Those questions started eating at me. So I did something that probably makes me a terrible person, but I had to know. I hired a private investigator to look into Melissa's background. What he found was disturbing. Melissa had a history of this exact scenario. 3 different men in the past 2 years had filed police reports claiming she'd falsely accused them of getting her pregnant. In each case, she'd demanded money for medical expenses and threatened to cause problems at their workplaces if they didn't pay. None of those men were actually fathers. She'd never been pregnant any of those times. It was a scam she'd been running, targeting guys she met at parties or through dating apps. The PI also found out that Melissa wasn't even pregnant currently. She'd been posting on social media regularly, and there was no indication of pregnancy. She was still going to bars, posting photos of herself drinking, wearing tight clothes that would show any kind of bump. Armed with this information, I called her and said I wanted to meet. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop near my apartment. I brought printed copies of everything the PI had found. When I confronted her with the evidence, she completely broke down. At first she tried to deny it, said the other men were lying, that this time was different. But when I showed her the social media posts and timeline inconsistencies, she couldn't keep up the lie. She admitted she wasn't pregnant, said she'd been desperate for money, and thought I looked like someone who would pay to make the problem go away. She'd researched my workplace online and figured showing up there would pressure me into cooperating. The whole thing had been planned from the beginning. She'd targeted me at the party specifically because I seemed successful and stable. She'd even researched my job and salary range before approaching me. What made it worse was that she didn't seem to understand how messed up this was. She kept saying she wasn't trying to hurt anyone, that she just needed help with some bills and thought this was easier than asking for a loan. I told her that what she'd done was fraud and that I had evidence of her doing this to other men. I said if she ever contacted me again or tried this scam on anyone else, I'd turn everything over to the police. She started crying and begging me not to report her, said she'd stop doing it and that she was sorry. But I'd already made up my mind. After she left, I called the police and filed a report. Turns out the other victims had never pressed charges because they were embarrassed or didn't think they had enough evidence, but with multiple cases and the PI's documentation, the police were able to build a case against her. Melissa was arrested 2 weeks later and charged with fraud and extortion. I had to testify about what happened, which was humiliating but necessary. The whole experience made me paranoid about hooking up with anyone. I keep thinking about how easily I could have fallen for her scam if I hadn't gotten suspicious. How many guys has she done this to who just paid her to go away? The detective told me that pregnancy scams are more common than people think, especially targeting young professionals who have money to lose and reputations to protect. I've completely changed how I approach casual relationships now. I'm way more careful about who I trust, and I always make sure I have some way to verify things if they seem off. That story is absolutely diabolical. The fact that she had this down to a system, researching victims beforehand and showing up at their workplaces to maximize pressure, shows a level of calculated manipulation that's genuinely scary. Thank God this guy trusted his instincts and hired that PI, because imagine how many other men just paid up to avoid the drama. Some people really will weaponize anything, even fake pregnancies, to make a quick buck. Here's one that'll make you question whether long-distance relationships can ever actually work. My long-distance boyfriend of 2 years has been living a completely different life, and I found out through TikTok. I'm 23, he's 25, and we met during my study abroad semester in London. Ryan was doing his master's degree there, and I was just there for 4 months, but we connected immediately. When my program ended and I had to come back to the US, we decided to try long distance. It seemed worth it because what we had felt really special. We'd video chat every day, text constantly, and he'd even started talking about transferring to a university here so we could be together. The time difference was rough, but we made it work. He'd call me before I went to work in the morning, which was evening for him. We'd watch movies together online, play games, send each other care packages, all the typical long-distance relationship stuff. Ryan always seemed busy with school and his part-time job, so I understood when he couldn't talk as much some weeks. He'd tell me about his classes, his flatmates, his job at this bookstore near campus. Everything seemed normal and consistent with what I knew about his life. About 6 months ago, he started being less available for our scheduled calls. He'd cancel last minute, saying he had to work late or had a big assignment due. When we did talk, he seemed distracted, like his mind was somewhere else. I chalked it up to stress from his thesis and tried to be understanding. Long distance is hard enough without adding pressure when someone's dealing with school stuff. Then last month, my friend Casey sent me a TikTok video with a message that just said, "Isn't this your boyfriend?" Wahib. I opened it and my heart completely stopped. It was Ryan, but not the Ryan I knew. He was at what looked like a house party. arm around some girl I'd never seen before, laughing and clearly drunk. The caption on the video said something about couple goals and was posted by the girl he was with. I watched it probably 50 times, trying to convince myself it wasn't him. But it was definitely Ryan. And he was definitely not acting like someone in a committed long-distance relationship. I went to the girl's profile and found dozens of videos and photos with Ryan going back months. Beach trips, dinner dates, cozy nights in watching movies. All the things he'd been telling me he was too busy with school to do with me. Her bio said she was also a student at his university. In some of the videos, she referred to Ryan as her boyfriend. There were photos of them holding hands, kissing, looking completely comfortable and established as a couple. The timeline was what really broke me. These weren't recent posts from after we'd maybe broken up. Some of the earliest photos with her were from almost a year ago, right around the time he'd been telling me how much he missed me and couldn't wait for me to visit him. I spent hours going through her social media, piecing together their relationship. They'd been together for at least 10 months, maybe longer. She clearly had no idea I existed, based on how openly she posted about him. There were photos of Ryan meeting her parents, attending her friends' birthday parties, going on weekend trips together. He was living a full relationship with this woman while maintaining our long-distance relationship with me. The most painful part was seeing how happy he looked with her. In all the photos and videos, he had this relaxed, genuine smile that I recognized from when we first met. He looked like himself, not stressed or distant like he'd been on our recent video calls. I screenshot everything before confronting him. When I called him that night, he answered like nothing was wrong, asking about my day and talking about some paper he was writing. I didn't ease into it. I just said, "Who is Emma?" I then sent him one of the photos I'd found. The silence on his end lasted forever. Then he started stammering, trying to explain. He said Emma was just a friend, that the photos were misleading, that her friends were always posting dramatic captions that didn't mean anything. But when I sent him the video of them clearly kissing at that party, he couldn't explain it away. Finally, he admitted that he'd been seeing Emma, but claimed it wasn't serious. Said he'd gotten lonely and made a mistake, but that I was the one he really wanted to be with. He begged me not to end things over what he called a temporary lapse in judgment. I asked him how long it had been going on. He said a few months. I told him I'd seen photos going back almost a year. That's when he broke down and told me the truth. He'd met Emma about 2 months after I'd left London. They'd started as friends, but it had developed into something more. He'd never meant for it to happen, but the distance between us was so hard, and Emma was right there. He said he'd tried to break up with Emma multiple times, but couldn't go through with it. And he couldn't bring himself to break up with me either because he still had feelings for me and hoped we'd figure out a way to be together, eventually. So he'd been maintaining both relationships for almost a year, telling Emma that he wasn't ready for anything serious, while telling me that he was planning to move to the US to be with me. The worst part was that Emma didn't know about me either. She thought she was in a casual relationship with someone who wasn't ready to commit, not knowing that he was already committed to someone else entirely. I felt horrible for her. She seemed like a nice person from her social media, and she had no idea she was the other woman in this situation. Neither of us had consented to being part of whatever this arrangement was. I ended things with Ryan immediately, told him he was a coward for stringing both of us along instead of making a choice. Then I did something that probably makes me petty, but I don't regret it. I found Emma on Instagram and sent her a message explaining the situation. I included screenshots of my conversations with Ryan, photos he'd sent me, evidence that we'd been in a relationship this whole time. Emma was devastated, but grateful that I'd told her. She said she'd had suspicions that Ryan was hiding something, but never imagined it was another girlfriend. She'd been pushing for them to make things official, and he'd always had excuses about not being ready. We actually ended up talking for hours about all the lies Ryan had told both of us. Comparing stories, we realised he'd been incredibly manipulative, telling each of us what we wanted to hear while keeping us both on the hook. Emma broke up with Ryan the next day. She told me he tried the same tactics with her that he'd used with me, claiming she was the one he really wanted and that I was just a mistake from his past he couldn't let go of. Neither of us bought it. We both blocked him and haven't spoken to him since. Emma and I still check in with each other sometimes, bonded by the shared experience of being lied to by the same person. The whole thing made me realise that long-distance relationships require a level of trust that I'm not sure I'm capable of giving again. When someone is living a completely separate life, thousands of miles away, you're really just trusting them to be honest about everything. And some people aren't worthy of that trust. What a story. 2 years of video calls and care packages while he was playing house with someone else. The level of compartmentalization required to maintain 2 full relationships is honestly impressive in the most sociopathic way possible. At least Emma and this girl found each other and could compare notes, because imagine if they'd never figured it out. Ryan could have kept that going indefinitely if TikTok hadn't exposed him. Let me hit you with one more story that's going to make you never want to go to a wedding again. I was asked to be maid of honour for my best friend's wedding and discovered the groom was cheating with my sister 2 weeks before the ceremony. I'm 27, my best friend Kate is 26, and we've known each other since college. When she got engaged to Derek last year, I was genuinely happy for her. Derek seemed like a good guy, and Kate was head over heels in love. Kate asked me to be her maid of honour, and I was honoured. We'd been planning this wedding for months, and Kate had put so much thought and effort into every detail. She'd found this perfect venue, designed her own invitations, even learned calligraphy to address them all by hand. My sister Jess is 24 and had been dating Derek's friend Mike for about 6 months. Through that connection, she'd gotten to know Derek pretty well and was invited to the wedding as Mike's +1. Everything seemed normal and friendly between all of us. 2 weeks before the wedding, I was at Kate's apartment helping her with final preparations. We were organising seating charts and gift bags when Kate got a call from the florist about some last-minute changes to the bouquets. She stepped outside to take the call. While she was gone, her phone buzzed with a text notification on the counter. I normally wouldn't look, but the preview showed part of a message that caught my attention. It said something like, "Can't wait to see you tonight," with a heart emoji. I figured it was from Derek, which would be sweet, but something about the contact name looked off. When Kate came back in, I mentioned that she'd gotten a text that seemed romantic and asked if she and Derek had special plans that night. Kate looked confused and said they didn't have any plans, that Derek was supposedly working late at his accounting firm. She picked up her phone to check the message, and her face went completely white. The text wasn't from Derek, it was from someone saved in her phone as Jessica work, but the message was definitely not work-related. It said, "Derek's working late again. Perfect timing. Can't wait to feel your hands on me tonight, baby." Kate stared at the message for what felt like forever. Then she looked at me and asked if I thought there was any chance this was meant for someone else. I wanted to say yes, but the message was clearly sent to Kate's number specifically. That's when Kate admitted something that made my stomach drop. She said she'd been getting weird messages like this for months, always from numbers she didn't recognise or contact names that seemed fake. She'd assumed they were spam or wrong numbers and had been deleting them, but looking at this one more carefully, she realised the contact name, Jessica Work, had been in her phone for a while. She'd never questioned it because she thought maybe it was some work contact she'd forgotten about. We went through her message history with this contact and found dozens of explicit messages going back months. All of them referencing Derek, all of them clearly from someone who was sleeping with him regularly. The messages painted a picture of an ongoing affair, references to meeting at hotels, to times when Kate would be out of town, to covering for each other when their partners got suspicious. Kate was shaking as she read through them. She kept saying she couldn't believe Derek would do this to her, especially so close to their wedding. All the money they'd spent, all the plans they'd made, all their friends and family who were travelling for the ceremony. Then I noticed something in one of the messages that made my blood run cold. The person had mentioned something about, Your sister being so clueless, and how funny it was that they were hiding right under everyone's noses. Kate looked at me, with this horrible realization dawning on her face. She asked me if I thought Jessica could be my sister Jess. I wanted to say no, but everything was starting to add up in the worst possible way. Jess had been spending a lot of time with Derek lately, always saying it was because of wedding planning, or because Mike couldn't make it to certain events. She'd been the one suggesting group activities that would put her and Derek in the same place. Kate called the number that had been texting her. It rang once, and then we heard a familiar ringtone coming from the hallway outside Kate's apartment. Jess's ringtone. My sister was standing in the hallway, probably about to knock on Kate's door, with her phone ringing in her hand. When she saw us looking at her through the peephole, she knew she'd been caught. Kate opened the door and asked Jess directly if she'd been sleeping with Derek. Jess tried to deny it at first, but Kate showed her the messages. All the evidence was right there. Finally, Jess broke down and admitted everything. She said it had started a few months ago when she and Derek had been left alone at a group dinner while everyone else was outside smoking. They'd started talking and there had been this connection. She claimed she'd tried to stop it multiple times, but that Derek kept pursuing her, said he'd told her that he wasn't sure about marrying Kate, that he was having doubts but didn't know how to call off the wedding. Kate was devastated. She asked Jess how she could do this to her, how she could sit through months of wedding planning knowing she was sleeping with the groom. Jess just kept apologising and saying she never meant for it to go this far. The worst part was that the wedding was in 2 weeks. All the vendors were booked, guests had made travel arrangements, the venue was paid for. Kate had to decide whether to confront Derek and potentially call off the wedding, or pretend she didn't know and figure out what to do after. She chose to confront Derek immediately, called him and told him to come over, that they needed to talk. When he arrived and saw both me and Jess there, he knew something was wrong. Kate showed him the messages and asked him to explain. Derek tried the same tactics Jess had used, claiming it was a mistake, that he'd been having cold feet about the wedding and had made bad decisions. But Kate wasn't buying it. She asked him how long he'd been planning to continue the affair after they got married, whether he'd been planning to leave her eventually or just keep cheating indefinitely. Derek couldn't give her a straight answer. He kept saying he loved her and wanted to marry her, but that he'd gotten confused and made mistakes. He begged her not to call off the wedding over what he called a temporary lapse in judgment. Kate told him she needed time to think. Derek left and Jess left with him. I stayed with Kate while she processed everything and decided what to do. Ultimately, Kate called off the wedding. She said she couldn't marry someone who'd been cheating with her maid of honour's sister, and she couldn't trust Derek to be faithful going forward. The next few days were a nightmare of cancelling vendors, notifying guests, and dealing with the financial fallout. Kate lost thousands of dollars in deposits, and her parents had to help cover the costs of cancelling everything. Jess and Derek apparently kept seeing each other after the wedding was called off. They're still together now, almost 6 months later. Kate and I haven't spoken to Jess since everything came out. The whole experience destroyed multiple relationships at once. Kate lost her fiancé and had to deal with the humiliation of calling off her wedding. I lost my relationship with my sister over her betrayal of my best friend. And Kate's family lost money and had to explain to all their relatives why the wedding was suddenly cancelled. That was the end of that story. Your own sister sleeping with your best friend's fiancé 2 weeks before the wedding is the kind of betrayal that splits families permanently. The fact that Jess is still with Derek just proves this wasn't some drunken mistake. It was a calculated decision to blow up multiple people's lives for their own selfish desires. Some bridges really can't be rebuilt after being burned that thoroughly. If you've made it through all these relationship disasters, consider subscribing because, like I said, I read stories just like these every single day. Take care, and I will see you tomorrow.